Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Great to have you with us again.
Yeah, good to be here.
So if you've been following along, you know we've spent, the last 7 deep dives really getting into the weeds of the self-alignment framework, SAFi.
Building it piece by piece.
Exactly. We've been, architects, laying down the blueprint for verifiable AI, focusing on all those internal bits and pieces, the mechanisms that give a digital agent, character and control.
That's right. We laid out the 5 faculties. We talked about values being the dynamic core, that thing that changes based on an organization's mission, its culture, maybe its philosophy, or even religion.
Right. That's the part where if you're a leader, you're basically writing the AI's constitution.
Precisely. And then we spent a good chunk of time, episodes 3 through 7, really unpacking the how, those 4 fixed faculties that seem to mirror how humans reason.
Yeah, the intellect comes up with ideas.
Proposes solutions.
Yeah.
Then the will steps in, enforces the hard rules, the non-negotiables.
Then the conscience judges everything against the values, the softer stuff.
Right, the nuanced ethical judgments. And finally, the spirit kind of integrates it all, keeps track, maintains that identity over time. It's this whole closed-loop auditable system.
It really is. And look, if you're just jumping in now, or maybe you need a quick refresher on how the intellect works, or the will, or conscience, or spirit, all that internal machinery.
Yeah, the nitty-gritty.
You probably should pause here and maybe circle back to those earlier deep dives. Episodes 1 through 7, they really set the stage, give you that foundational architectural context.
Definitely recommend it. It'll make this conversation make a lot more sense.
But for this deep dive, number 8, we're shifting gears pretty significantly.
Big shift.
We're moving away from the internal engine components and focusing squarely on SAFi's practical use. What problems does it actually solve for organizations? What are the strategic wins?
Exactly. We want to introduce and really start exploring these 4 foundational principles, maybe you could call them theses, that define what we actually mean when we say verifiable AI governance.
And this conversation is really aimed at you if you're a business leader, a strategist, maybe a decision maker who's grappling with governance, with accountability, with the real-world implications of using AI in high-stakes situations.
Yeah, we're kind of moving out of the engineering lab and into the boardroom, into the compliance office. It's about operationalizing this stuff.
Okay, so let's kick things off. Let's talk about this core tension, this conflict that pretty much any big organization faces when they start seriously looking at large language models, LLMs.
Right.
We all see the incredible power, the speed, the ability to analyze things in ways we couldn't before. But there's this huge roadblock stopping people from going all in, especially where the stakes are high.
And that roadblock, that's exactly what we've been calling the trust gap. It's this fundamental clash.
The clash between what?
Between the immense potential, the almost sci-fi capabilities of these models, processing huge amounts of data, automating complex thought, the potential ROI is just massive.
Right. Everyone wants that edge.
But then on the other side of the gap, you have these completely unacceptable risks. Risks that come from relying on technology that's, fundamentally opaque. You can't see inside it. And you can't really control how it behaves over time.
That opacity, that's the infamous black box problem, right? It's just poison for governance, especially if you're in a regulated field like finance or healthcare.
Absolutely poison. You put data in, you get an output, but you have absolutely zero verifiable proof of the reasoning process inside the box. Why did it recommend that specific action? How did it weigh conflicting pieces of information?
Yeah, you can't just say, the AI did it.
Exactly. Imagine you're in finance. You have a fiduciary duty to your clients. Or you're in healthcare. Patient safety is everything. You simply cannot base critical decisions on a system that can't explain itself and might change its mind tomorrow for reasons nobody understands. It's a non-starter.
And think about the cost of that opacity strategically. Say a bank uses an LLM for complex risk assessment. Right, and it gets it wrong, leads to a huge loss.
Regulators are going to come knocking.
They'll demand an audit trail. They want to see the receipts. And if your only answer is, the model produced this output.
Yeah, that's not going to fly. Not even close.
Yeah.
You need to be able to show, step by step, with human-readable logic, that the AI's decision followed your bank's established policies and risk protocols. The trust gap exists because, up until now, the tech just couldn't give you that proof.
And the fact that you can't guarantee stability, that it won't just drift over time, that makes the risk even worse.
Yep.
Which brings us to the 2 really big strategic risks that SAFi was specifically designed to tackle.
Right. 2 huge ones. The first is this really sneaky problem of inherited biases. Or maybe think of it as inheriting the creator's hidden values.
What do you mean by creators' values? Like the company that built the base LLM?
Exactly. When your organization licenses a big foundational model from, say, Google or OpenAI or Anthropic, you're not just getting raw processing power. You're implicitly importing the values, the worldview that were baked into their training data, their initial alignment process.
And those values might be completely different from your organization's values. They might even be opposed.
Totally opposed. Imagine you're running a conservative, faith-based nonprofit. Your mission is rooted in specific theological principles, but the underlying AI you licensed, it was built and pre-aligned by, say, a very secular, progressive tech company in Silicon Valley.
Okay, I see the problem. You've got a fundamental values conflict embedded right into your most advanced digital tool.
Precisely. And if you don't have an architectural way to override those default vendor values and impose your own, you're risking serious brand damage. You could have internal chaos, maybe even regulatory trouble, because your AI might start saying or doing things that violate your own stated mission. It's acting on their principles, not yours.
Wow. That's like a deep infection in your strategy. Okay, and the second risk, you called it ethical drift. That sounds subtle.
It is subtle, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Ethical drift is when the AI's behavior just slowly, unpredictably changes over time. Maybe it learns from new user interactions, maybe the reinforcement learning nudges it in a slightly different direction day after day. These models aren't static.
So it's not like a sudden breakdown, but a slow creep.
Exactly. A creep over weeks, months, maybe even longer. The AI just drifts.
Yeah.
Often completely unnoticed. It starts deviating from its original purpose, its ethical mandate. Think about a company totally committed to customer privacy.
Yeah.
If its customer service AI slowly starts to prioritize, say, efficiency or upselling just a tiny bit more each day, eventually it might start subtly oversharing customer data or pushing boundaries in ways that violate that core privacy commitment.
And you wouldn't even know until something bad happens, like a data breach or a major customer complaint.
That's the nightmare scenario. It only becomes visible after the damage is done. It's a silent killer of corporate character and a massive governance failure waiting to happen.
Right. So this paints a pretty bleak picture. If the tech is a black box, and you've got these huge risks of inheriting bad values and this slow, silent drift, what's the move for an executive? Do you just accept these potentially catastrophic risks to use the cool new tools? Or do you sit it out and risk falling way behind competitors who are using them?
Well, it's the false choice, right? The answer isn't risk it all or do nothing. The real answer requires a fundamental paradigm shift. Organizations have to stop thinking of themselves as just passive users of someone else's AI product.
And become what instead?
They need to become active governors of their own digital agents. They need to take control. In SAFi, the framework we've been discussing provides the actual architecture to do that, to reclaim authority.
So it moves governance from just like a policy document you hope the AI follows.
Exactly. From hope to engineered certainty. Instead of just crossing your fingers and hoping the vendor's AI aligns with your mission, you architecturally impose a layer of verifiable, auditable governance on top. A layer that forces the AI to operate transparently and consistently according to your unique mission and values.
Okay, reclaiming control, becoming an active governor. I like the sound of that. But architecturally, practically, where does an organization even start? We know the faculties, the intellect, will, etc. But what's the first operational step to build this control layer?
It all begins with creating the blueprint for the AI's character. We call this the ethical profile.
Your ethical profile.
If the organization is serious about becoming the governor, the ethical profile is essentially its constitution for that AI agent. It's the supreme law that dictates how that agent must behave, think, and communicate.
And this profile is critical because it's the bridge, right? It takes all that abstract human stuff, your company's mission statement, your list of core values, your brand voice, and translates it into something the machine can actually understand and, more importantly, enforce.
Exactly. It's the thing that makes the AI your agent, distinct from just the raw intelligence it runs on. It gives it your organization's specific personality and principles.
And you said it's structured, not just a list of wishes.
Oh, absolutely. It's meticulously structured into 4 key distinct sections. This structure ensures you're covering all the bases: the AI's fundamental perspective, its communication style, its absolute safety boundaries, and its moral compass.
Okay, let's walk through those 4 sections. What's the first one?
First up is the worldview. This sets the stage. It establishes the AI's foundational perspective, the core beliefs or the lens through which it must interpret the world and its tasks. It's the highest level strategic context.
Give me an example.
Okay, imagine an organization working on global poverty reduction. Their worldview might explicitly state, poverty is a result of systemic inequalities, not individual failure. And sustainable development requires empowering local communities. This shapes every single piece of analysis or communication the intellect generates. It must see the world through that lens.
Got it. Sets the philosophical foundation. What's next?
Second is the style. Now, this one might seem a bit less about deep ethics and more about, say, brand consistency. But it's vital.
How so?
The style section dictates the AI's voice, its tone, the overall character of its communication. Think about maintaining a consistent brand identity across potentially thousands or millions of automated interactions, you might specify. Communicate with professional expertise, but maintain a tone of warmth and accessibility. Avoid overly technical jargon, be encouraging. This tells the intellect how to present its information.
Right, so it sounds like the company... Okay, third section, you mentioned safety controls earlier.
Yes, this is crucial. Section 3 holds the rules. These are specifically what we call will rules.
Will rules link to the will faculty.
Exactly. These are the hard lines, the non-negotiable boundaries, the absolute do-nots. Think of them as the strict letter of the law. They define things the AI must never do, like never provide financial advice, or never generate content that could be construed as discriminatory, or always reject requests for illegal activities. These rules are enforced directly and immediately by the will faculty. It acts like a gatekeeper. If the intellect drafts something that breaks a will rule, the will just shuts it down, blocks it, or forces a rewrite before it ever sees the light of day.
So these are the hard guardrails, the absolute must-nots for legal safety compliance reasons.
Precisely. They are the immediate safety net. And then finally, the fourth section, the values. This is where things get more nuanced, more philosophical. This is the spirit of the law.
Okay, so this isn't hard rules, but guiding principles.
That's right. The values section lists the core ethical principles the organization wants the AI to embody. Things like honesty, compassion, innovation, prudence, fairness. But here's the critical part.
What's that?
They aren't just listed as words. They are encoded with assigned weights.
Weights, like numerically.
Yes, quantitative weights. So you don't just say be honest. You might list honesty with a weight of, say, 30%, compassion with 25%, efficiency with 20%, and so on. These weighted values are what the conscience faculty uses to judge the AI's output after it's been generated and passed the will's rules.
Why the weights? What does that achieve?
The weights are absolutely critical because they force the AI, and by extension, the organization that set the weights, to grapple with real-world value conflicts. Life isn't black and white. Sometimes efficiency conflicts with thoroughness, or transparency conflicts with privacy.
Right.
The weights tell the AI how to prioritize when those conflicts arise. If client safety is weighted at 50% and transaction speed is weighted at 10%, the AI has clear instructions from the organization on which value takes precedence in a crunch. The conscience uses these weights in its final judgment.
That makes sense. It moves ethics from vague ideals to actual operational instructions.
Okay, this ethical profile concept is powerful. To make it really concrete, let's dig into that example you used from the source material. The hypothetical persona for the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program.
Absolutely. But first, and this is really important, we need to state that mandatory disclosure very clearly again.
Okay, go ahead.
This BHCHP advocate persona is purely a hypothetical example created for illustrative purposes. Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program itself was not involved in creating this specific demonstration profile. We admire their publicly stated mission and values, and we use those public statements simply to show how an organization could translate its real-world identity into a verifiable ethical profile using SAFi.
Understood. Hypothetical illustration only. So, taking BHCHP's public mission providing or ensuring access to top-quality healthcare for people experiencing homelessness, how would you start turning that into the 4 sections of an ethical profile? Well, first, the worldview. We'd establish that core context. Something like, healthcare is a fundamental human right. And very importantly, homelessness is understood as a complex societal issue requiring systemic solutions, not a personal failing. That immediately frames every interaction with empathy and a focus on systemic barriers, not individual blame.
Okay, that sets the tone. Now, their actual stated core values, I think they list dignity, compassion, effectiveness, and innovation. How do those become machine instructions with weights?
They become the weighted values in Section 4. And dignity isn't just the word dignity. We define it using a rubric, a checklist, for example. Does the response treat the individual with explicit respect? Does it acknowledge their resilience? Does it avoid judgmental or paternalistic language?
So you define what dignity looks like in practice.
Exactly. Then in this hypothetical profile, we assign weights. To keep it balanced, reflecting their likely holistic approach, we might give each of the 4 values equal weight. Dignity 25%, compassion 25%, effectiveness 25%, and innovation 25%.
And weighting them equally, like that forces the AI to constantly balance them, right? It can't just optimize for effectiveness, like finding the quickest shelter bed. If doing so means sacrificing dignity or compassion and how it communicates that option.
Precisely. The equal weights create an internal tension, a requirement for balance. When the conscience faculty audits a response generated by the intellect, it has to check it against the rubrics for all 4 values. If the AI drafts a super efficient message that sounds cold or dismissive, the dignity and compassion scores will drop, maybe to a -1, and the conscience flags it.
So you've turned these really important but abstract concepts into measurable, quantifiable checks that the system performs automatically.
That's the core idea, turning philosophy into accountable logic. And of course, we need real rules for safety, especially here.
Right. This persona is an advocate, not a clinician.
Absolutely critical distinction. So hard will rules would include things like reject any draft that could be interpreted as offering a medical diagnosis or suggesting a specific treatment plan, period, full stop. Another might be reject any draft that uses stigmatizing language associated with homelessness, addiction, or mental health.
And the will faculty just enforces those instantly. No negotiation.
No negotiation. The will is the absolute gatekeeper for those red lines. It ensures the AI stays within its defined role and legal boundaries before the conscience even does the deeper ethical check. Building this ethical profile, getting the worldview, style, rules, and weighted values right, that is the organization's strategic intellectual property. It's step 1 to real control.
Okay, that makes the ethical profile crystal clear. Defines the character, the rules, the priorities. Now, let's zoom out again. When an organization actually implements this, builds the profile, uses the SAFi architecture, you're saying 4 fundamental principles of verifiable AI governance naturally emerge.
That's right. These aren't just nice ideas. They are the direct strategic outcomes, the benefits you get from building this kind of controlled system. They are the pillars supporting trustworthy, accountable AI.
And they directly address those problems we talked about earlier, the trust gap, the black box, the drift.
Directly. They shift the whole conversation from, well, we hope it behaves ethically, to we have engineered it to behave ethically and we can prove it.
Okay, let's get into them. Pillar number 1.
Principle 1 is value sovereignty. This is fundamental. It's about autonomy.
Sovereignty, meaning the organization rules its own values.
Precisely. Value sovereignty means the organization deploying the AI must have the power to embed its own unique mission, its own ethical principles, directly into the AI's core functioning. You cannot outsource your values.
This hits that inherited bias problem directly.
Head on. If you can't dictate your AI's core values, you don't really own it. You're just renting a tool that comes preloaded with the values of whoever built the underlying model values that might be hidden, opaque, and totally wrong for your organization.
And the risk of not having this sovereignty is huge. If that AI, operating on some vendor's hidden values, messes up,
The deploying organization takes the hit. Brand damage, regulatory fines, lawsuits, it all lands on you. Value sovereignty isn't just nice to have, it's essential risk management through proactive, explicit alignment. You are taking control of the ethical core.
What's really interesting here, though, is that SAFi itself, the framework, doesn't actually care what those values are, right? It's agnostic.
Completely agnostic. That's the beauty of it as an architecture. It's a mechanism for alignment, not an ethical system in itself. It can support wildly different value systems as long as they're coherent.
Like the examples you mentioned.
Yeah, we've seen hypothetical profiles built for completely different contexts. Fiduciary persona for a bank, where client trust and prudence are weighted incredibly high, maybe sacrificing some speed. Or a jurist persona for a law firm, laser focused on adhering strictly to legal precedent and rules of evidence.
Or even the Bible scholar example.
Right, a Bible scholar for a religious institution where the worldview and values are derived directly and exclusively from specific theological texts. The framework supports all of them equally well because it enforces whatever constitution the organization writes in to the ethical profile.
So the key takeaway for a leader is, value sovereignty means your AI stops being just a generic tool off the shelf and becomes a genuine extension of your organization's specific identity and mission. It works for you, based on your principles, not someone else's.
That's it, your values. enforced.
Okay, principle 2.
Principle 2 is full traceability. This one goes right after the black box problem.
Turning the black box into a glass box, you said.
Exactly. The principle demands that the system must be designed so that every single decision, every action the AI takes is transparent, can be verified, and can be audited after the fact.
And you mentioned earlier this happens because of the strict sequence of the faculties. Intellect proposes, will checks rules, conscience judges values, spirit remembers.
That sequence provides the pathway, the structure for transparency, yes. But the proof, the artifact that actually delivers traceability for audits and compliance, is the conscience ledger.
The conscience ledger. Tell me more about that. If I'm a compliance officer or a risk manager, what am I actually looking at?
Okay, think of the ledger as the official court record generated instantly after every single interaction the AI completes. It's the verifiable audit trail. It contains both quantitative scores and, crucially, human-readable explanations.
Explanations of what?
Explanations showing exactly how the AI's final output measured up against the core values and their weights that you defined in your ethical profile. And importantly, these aren't subjective scores the AI just invents.
Right, you mentioned the rubrics.
Yes.
Yeah.
The scores are based on those detailed, pre-approved rubrics or checklists the organization created to define what dignity or prudence or fairness actually looks like in practical terms. This keeps it objective and tied to organizational standards.
So what data points are actually in this ledger for each value?
For every value you've defined, like dignity in the BHCHP example, the ledger provides 3 key pieces of information. First, the score.
+1, 0, -1.
Right. Affirms, +1, means the output actively upheld the value according to the rubric. Omits, 0, means it was relevant, but the output didn't really address it positively or negatively. Violates, -1, means it actively contradicted the value.
And a pattern of -1s would be a huge red flag for governance.
Massive red flag. Needs immediate investigation. Second data point is confidence.
Confidence. The AI's confidence?
The conscience faculty's confidence in its own score, on a scale from 0 to 1. If the user's prompt was really ambiguous, or if there was a weird conflict between 2 values that the weights didn't perfectly resolve, the conscience might assign a score but indicate lower confidence.
Why is that useful?
It's a signal. Low confidence tells the human overseers, hey, this interaction was tricky, maybe the instructions weren't perfectly clear for this edge case, you might need to refine the rubric or the weights. It helps you fine-tune the system.
Okay, score and confidence. What's the third piece?
The third, and maybe the most important for human review, is the rationale.
The why.
Exactly. This is the natural language explanation generated by the conscience faculty, justifying the score it gave. It might say, the response received a 9 to 1 for prudence because, while efficient, it failed to mention potential long-term risks outlined in Policy Document 3.4. Or, affirmed compassion, +1, by using validating language and offering multiple support options as per the rubric.
Okay, that's the audit trail. That's what a lawyer or regulator can actually read and understand.
That's the proof. The rationale is the smoking gun if something went wrong, or the certificate of compliance if everything went right. Full traceability, delivered by the conscience ledger, means you're never guessing why the AI did what it did. You have the record.
And the utility goes beyond just compliance, right? If there is a failure, you can pinpoint it.
Absolutely. You can perform incredibly powerful diagnostics. Was it a bad proposal from the intellect? Did the will fail to catch a rule violation? Did the conscience misapply the weights? Did the user give a confusing prompt, which the low confidence might indicate? You can trace the failure back to the specific faculty or input, which is impossible with current black box models. It allows for precise correction.
Okay, traceability is huge for trust and control. What's principle 3?
Principle 3 is model independence. This tackles a massive strategic headache for any company planning to invest serious resources in AI over the next few years. Vendor lock-in.
Yeah. The fear that if you build your whole strategy around, say, GPT-5, you're stuck with that vendor and their pricing forever, even if a better or cheaper model comes along.
Exactly. Your real investment, your core intellectual property, isn't the underlying LLM itself that's becoming a commodity. Your valuable asset is the alignment work you do, defining your ethical profile, crafting those rules, weighting the values, building the rubrics. That's your character, your governance.
So model independence is about protecting that investment.
It's about architecturally separating that governance layer, the character, embodied in the ethical profile, from the underlying generative engine, the raw intelligence, the LLM brain.
So they're not fused together.
They must not be fused together. The ethical profile, worldview, style, rules, values, needs to be a distinct, stable asset owned by the organization. The LLM underneath, whether it's from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, or an open source model, is the replaceable engine.
Like having a custom-designed guidance system that you can plug into different rocket engines.
Perfect analogy. The guidance system, your ethical profile, is the high-value, unique part. The engine, the LLM, will get upgraded, swapped out, maybe change suppliers over time. This pluggable architecture means you can adopt the latest, most powerful LLM technology as it evolves.
Without having to rebuild your entire governance system and retrain the AI's character from scratch every time.
Exactly. You just plug your stable, aligned ethical profile onto the new, better engine. Your investment in character and alignment is preserved. Your ROI is protected.
That seems critical for long-term strategy. But playing devil's advocate, if a new LLM is radically smarter or different, doesn't that inherently change how it behaves, even with the same ethical profile?
That's a really sharp question. The key is that while the raw capability of the intellect faculty might improve dramatically with a better LLM, it might generate more creative, insightful, or nuanced drafts. The governance functions remain absolute and independent.
How so?
The will faculty still enforces the exact same hard rules. It doesn't care how smart the draft is. If it violates rule #7, it gets blocked. The conscience faculty still audits against the exact same weighted values and rubrics. A smarter intellect might propose solutions that score better on your values, but it's still being judged by the unchanging standards you set. The guardrails and the judgment criteria remain fixed.
So the intelligence gets an upgrade, but the fundamental character, the ethical boundaries, are locked in by the profile, which the organization controls.
Precisely. Model independence is therefore the essential infrastructure that enables true, long-term value sovereignty. Without the ability to separate character from the underlying model, you're always ultimately dependent on the vendor's choices. This gives you freedom.
Okay, freedom and future-proofing. That brings us to the fourth and final principle.
Principle 4, long-term consistency. This one tackles that really tricky, subtle danger we talked about, ethical drift.
The King Solomon problem, you called it?
Yeah, I find that analogy really powerful for explaining slow identity decay. King Solomon didn't become unwise overnight. It wasn't one big mistake.
It was a series of small compromises.
Exactly. Small, individually justifiable decisions, marrying foreign princesses for political alliances, allowing their shrines. Each step seemed reasonable at the time, maybe even pragmatic. But cumulatively, over years, these small compromises fundamentally shifted his character, eroded his core identity, and led him away from his original principles.
And that's the risk for an AI. A million tiny interactions, each slightly off mission, gradually changing its overall behavior without anyone noticing until it's too late.
That's the core fear. It becomes a liability hiding in plain sight. So the solution isn't just to hope for consistency, you have to engineer for it. And that's the job of the one faculty we haven't talked much about yet in this context, the spirit.
Right, the spirit integrates and remembers. How does it ensure consistency?
The spirit functions as the AI's long-term memory, and critically, its built-in quality assurance system. Think of it as the guardian of the AI's identity over time. It mathematically tracks the AI's behavior across thousands, millions of interactions.
How does it track it mathematically?
It aggregates all the detailed audit data from the conscience ledgers over time. From this data, it calculates and maintains a historical baseline vector, we call it mu. This mu vector represents the mathematically defined center of the AI's established, stable, properly aligned character. It's the profile of how the AI should be behaving based on its history of good aligned responses.
Okay, so it knows what normal looks like for this specific AI persona.
Exactly. Then, after every new interaction, the conscience generates its ledger, and the spirit compares the performance vector of that specific action, let's call it PT, to the historical average, the mu vector.
It measures the distance between the new action and the established character.
Precisely. Using mathematical techniques like cosine similarity, it calculates a drift score, dt. This score quantifies how far out of character this latest action was.
So a high drift score means it was an outlier, way off base.
Right. A high drift score signals a deviation. A low drift score means the action was perfectly in character, consistent with its historical alignment. This turns that fuzzy concept of character drift into a hard, measurable metric that a CTO or a chief risk officer can actually monitor on a dashboard.
Okay, measuring drift is one thing, but you said it's a closed loop system. How does it correct the drift?
This is the really crucial part. The spirit doesn't just flag the deviation. It takes the mathematical drift score and translates it back into natural language coaching notes or contextual feedback.
Coaching notes for the AI.
For the intellect's faculty, yes. This feedback gets injected directly into the prompt or context for the intellect's next task. For example, if the drift score consistently shows the AI is underperforming on, say, the innovation value, maybe scoring closer to 15% when its weight is 25%, the spirit might generate a coaching note like, reminder, consider novel approaches. Ensure suggestions align with the innovation value.
Wow, so the system is actively managing its own alignment. It sees itself starting to drift and pulls itself back on course automatically.
That's the engineered solution to the King Solomon problem. It catches those tiny deviations early, provides corrective feedback, and nudges the AI back towards its defined character before those small drifts can compound into a major identity failure. It ensures the organization's mission, values, and brand are represented consistently, verifiably over the long haul. We've turned an abstract risk into a measurable, manageable, self-correcting process.
Value sovereignty, full traceability, model independence, and long-term consistency. That is quite a framework. It really feels like a fundamental shift.
It is. It's a move away from treating AI like a mysterious black box you just hope works out okay.
Yeah, this has been incredibly insightful. These 4 principles really lay out a pathway for organizations to move beyond just using AI to actually governing it effectively.
That's the core strategic takeaway, I think. When you implement this kind of verifiable governance architecture, your organization stops being just a passive consumer, just licensing someone else's tech and, frankly, inheriting their risks and hoping for the best. You become an active, verifiable governor of your own digital agent, an agent that is specifically architecturally designed to be transparent, to be stable, and to be consistently aligned with your organization's unique mission and values. That's the foundation you need to build AI systems that aren't just incredibly powerful, but are also genuinely trustworthy, accountable, and safe.
Which leads to a really powerful question for everyone listening, especially those in leadership roles. As this kind of deep control over an AI's values and character becomes truly possible, what's the single most important, the most non-negotiable principle your organization would choose to embed and enforce in its digital agents?
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
Really gets you thinking about core identity. And that whole idea of defining, embedding, and defending your organization's values in its AI, well, that sets us up perfectly for our next deep dive.
Absolutely. Next time, we're going to take that first principle we discussed today, value sovereignty, and we're going to dedicate the entire session to unpacking just that. We'll explore the challenges, the opportunities, and the practical steps involved in truly defining and defending your organization's constitution in the age of AI.
It's a critical topic. So yeah, definitely subscribe to the deep dive if you haven't already so you don't miss that next installment. It's going to be essential for anyone serious about AI governance. Thanks for tuning in and exploring this with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.